Should Britain be doing more?
Yes, I think we should redouble our efforts. You know, we can't be neutral. And I was very interested in this photo of Vladimir Putin giving an address to the nation, you know, with a smart suit and the livery of state. He's trying to give the impression of a statesman pursuing legitimate aims, when he's the opposite. You know, he's a criminal and a bloodthirsty warmonger who's now making veiled threats of nuclear weapons, and we can't tell if they're genuine or not. But, you know, he's a dangerous, wicked man. And cast your mind back a few weeks where we had the bombing of a maternity hospital. We've had men, women and children killed across the conflict, but mums-to-be, new mums and babies put at risk and in some cases murdered in their beds, followed by Vladimir Putin cheering in Red Square, saying, "Well done me." I mean, is a brazen mass murderer. And I think everywhere across British politics and Europe, we've swung behind Zelensky, but I think we are in it for the long haul.
And what does the long haul look like to you? Is it decades? Is it what?
No, I don't think it'll be decades, but I think we were a bit late getting sanctions we've started under Boris Johnson. To be fair, though, he did ramp it up enormously in his last few months in office. We've supplied weapons, we've supplied training. I suspect we're doing a bit more than that can't be disclosed for security reasons. And as grim as it is, because no one wants a war, but it's a war that Ukraine must win, I think we just have to keep giving weapons to Ukraine. Because, sorry, just to finish, there can't be a negotiation when the negotiation is based on giving up part of a sovereign nation. Zelensky's made that clear.
So would you be prepared for this to go on for decades if it means that Zelensky's the winner?
Well, I think we're all desperate to avoid that, and even the horrors of that.
But answer the question, though, yes or no?
Well, hold on.
Yes.
Would I be prepared to allow it to go on for decades?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to go on for decades. We all hate
war.
War.
Would if it were a certainty that in order for President Zelensky to win, this would have to go on for at least a decade, would you, because you've expressed that Zelensky needs to win and there can't be any agreement in terms of territory, so it has to be all out war, would you be prepared for this to last a decade?
Yeah, so 1 decade. You said decades before and Putin's 70, but has Britain got to be willing to support Ukraine for a decade? Yes, because the alternative, as Zelensky said, is Ukraine being wiped off the map.
So your answer is yes, and this is my problem with this, like, almost robotic must support Zelensky, must support Ukraine
but what's your
forever take on this, because it's not realistic. We've been radicalised into essentially supporting World War III and nuclear war, and this isn't a video game. And I wish the people that are pushing for this, that are supporting Zelensky, who, I'm not going to use flowery words now, I think he's irresponsible, I think he's out of control, and I think that he needs to be reined in. We cannot afford for this to go on for a decade. So even if it were a possibility that he would definitely win in a decade, we cannot afford for this to go on. Even just recently, the OPEC announced that it was cutting oil production, which obviously Russia's very happy about, because that means even in places like America, oil prices are going to skyrocket now. Right before the midterms, by the way, that Biden's got to win because the Democrats are losing control of Congress. So financially, we're going to be in a position where we simply cannot fund this. There was even articles a few months ago about the likelihood of us being able to fund this war past 2022. What we need to be focusing on is a diplomatic solution, and that may indeed have to include assurances that Ukraine won't join NATO and allowing Russia to keep some of the territory that it's acquired already.
But
for example, Crimea.
You challenge me.
There's no way that they're going to be able to get Crimea back.
I have to challenge you. I hope you forgive me interrupting, but you challenge me. Zelensky is a hero to millions of people around the world. I don't think it's fair to be so negative about him. He didn't seek this war. It was forced upon him by the actions of one man in the Kremlin.
So you think that it's just the big, bad boogeyman? Because people on the left love to talk about being anti-establishment and all of this, but when it comes to these types of wars, which almost mimics the sort of rhetoric that was going on around the Iraq war, you think that there's no two sides to play in this, that America do not have any role whatsoever in using Ukraine as a proxy to fight Russia. You don't think so? It's all just big bad
Biden's been absolutely clear that he doesn't want a war with Russia. And I think no one wants a war with Russia. No one wants a war full stop. But the idea of a war with another nuclear power...
Biden doesn't want a war in Ukraine.
No, I said Biden
says otherwise.
No. But sorry, you do keep cutting me off. Biden said explicitly he doesn't want a war in Russia. Of course, Britain and America have strategic interests in Ukraine. But remember, neither Zelensky nor Ukraine wanted this war. It was forced upon them by an illegal invasion. Iraq is incomparable. Britain invaded Iraq.
I think it is comparable.
Britain has not invaded Ukraine. Britain has not invaded anywhere. I think the Iraq comparison is totally misleading.
No, it's about...
Russia invaded Ukraine.
No, it's the reason why I highlight Iraq is because it's about the rhetoric around it. So the rhetoric around Vladimir Putin is that he's this madman who's lost his mind. He wants to recreate the Soviet Union, which is stupid, because why would he want to do that? It doesn't make any sense. He wants to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. He's going to nuke London. All of this stuff, we're being pushed closer and closer into supporting all-out war and NATO getting involved in this conflict.
I haven't said any of those things.
But with regards to Iraq, it was the same kind of alarmist rhetoric. We need preemptive action. How the neoconservatives supported their warmongering agenda. Now we're hearing the need for preemptive action against Putin. It's the same language. And the fact that people cannot see that we're being sleepwalked into supporting something that is against all of our interests
is
mind-blowing.
When the Ukrainian people are already in the graveyard. It's not preemptive.
Again, you're employing emotion, though. You're employing emotion instead of looking logically and actually examining the things that Mr. Irresponsible Zelensky has said. Even there, protection of our skies. A few months ago, he was calling for a no-fly zone, which would mean that we would have to shoot down Russian planes.
Yeah,
it would mean World War III. The other day, he was talking about preemptive strikes against Russia. They then had to clarify that he didn't mean preemptive nuclear action.
President Zelensky is not running the UK. He did call for a no-fly zone. Zelensky's not running the UK. That's nonsense. Boris Johnson, whether you agree with him or not, said at the start of the conflict that Britain wouldn't put troops on the ground.
So these calls then for a no-fly zone, do you think that the UK should be helping to partake in creating a no-fly zone over Ukraine?
Well, I'm very nervous about that for the reason that Dominic outlined. Although I think I disagree enormously with nearly everything Dominic said, but with a no-fly zone, logical extension is that you'd be willing to shoot down a Russian jet. And that's a whole other level of escalation that we should be deeply concerned about. So I think that's where Britain has, and to give credit to the Tories, have not been gung-ho. They have been risk-averse as anyone would be, because no one wants the war.
Not been very risk-averse, I don't think.
But to be fair, I don't agree with Boris Johnson on pretty much anything, but he was clear we don't want a war with Russia.
Doesn't that worry you?
And
Does that worry you a bit? The fact that you don't agree with a politician like Boris Johnson on just about anything, but you just so happen to agree with Boris Johnson on Ukraine or on this war.
But I'm not
For
that
all
tribal.
of the left-wing people that are actually watching this, that support this establishment line on Ukraine, they really do need to do some investigating. Your red line is nuclear war, as you've just said.
That's not my red line. Why are you waving your pen at me?
It's because you wouldn't support a no-fly zone. So, obviously, the following on from that, you shoot down a Russian plane, we're playing World War III, folks. That's your red line. So you must have a backbone and say that Zelensky's repeated comments about protecting skies and about preemptive strikes, they're irresponsible and he needs to be reined in. You should be brave enough to say that.
I think you're getting too angry waving a pen at me and saying what my red lines are. And I'm not sure viewers really care what my red lines are. I'm not an ambassador to anywhere. But I think a no-fly zone is fraught with additional risks for everyone.
So he should stop saying that then, shouldn't he?